All right, so I actually did a lot less preparation than I was intending to for Teaching Tuesday. I was just looking over my notes, and I was thinking the next thing that we might want to talk about with everybody is how to work with objects, what objects are. We didn't really talk about those, but everyone's been using them throughout their projects. Um, so before we do that, though, I'm also very open to any other types of blockers that people have, questions that they have that they want to talk about that we can try to solve together. And that will be useful for everybody who's listening in, I think.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
We have in the court selector, you have in the basic questions already written so that it tells you a list of all the courts you can file in, and it's an and list. And I found in the DocAssemble like documentation how to change the and to an or, because for our interview, it's only two courts and it's really redundant. It goes district court and probate and family court. So we'd like to just change that to an or, but I can't quite get it.
Sure. Yeah. That's a great question. So if it's specifically for the court list, then I think the answer is we kind of had that language in as placeholder, and I don't think it makes sense for very many of the interviews to say what courts they can use if we also if we already are limiting the courts they can choose from. So and we're going to have a new selector there.
Okay.
But we can go over how to do it anyway, because I think the idea of changing the list from and to or is something everyone might need to do. We do it in a couple places for the 209A, and I also wrote a method rather, on the people class that does that for everybody. So you don't have to write the syntax, but it might be helpful to see like what you're doing. So do you want to share the code and we can just kind of go through how you would do it right there?
Is that big enough?
Yeah. All right.
So here's the question.
Yes, so it says, yeah, comma and list. So this is really perfect. So what we need to do is to have, there's a keyword argument to the comma and list function that's called and string. Mm-hmm. So inside that comma and list, after allowed courts, put a comma inside the parentheses. So it's one of the arguments of the comma and list function. So all of the arguments are separated with commas and they're inside the brackets, the round parentheses, that is. I like to put a space there too, just to make it easier to read whenever I have an argument. And then this particular keyword argument is called and underscore string. And just do equals. This is how keyword arguments work. So basically in Python, there's two types of arguments to functions you can have. You can have ones where they're just like the position in the order of arguments is how Python knows what you want to do with that argument. Keyword arguments are optional, and you always have to say the name of the variable that's an argument that you're trying to set. Because you don't know, you can't detect it just from the order of the arguments. It has to be this way by giving it the direct name. Michelle has raised her hand.
Thanks, sorry. How does this interact with translation? Because this seems like a tricky spot to translate.
It's a good question. So the way that I would like to do it here, and that we do in the 209A, is we use the word translation function. So first, let's just see what would happen if we didn't do that, because I think that might be like a nuance that's a little complex here. So if we didn't want to worry about translation, we would just put the word we want inside quotes here. So we would replace it with the word or.
Singular quotes?
Singular, double are almost always do the exact same thing in Python. The difference is inside single quotes, you can put double quotes. Inside double quotes, you can put single quotes. So if you just think back to like your rules of English for when you're supposed to use one or the other, it's the same thing in Python, essentially.
Try
Except you
sort.
can't nest them more than one time.
Okay. Right, so that,
I've noticed this, not to go off on a tangent, can we put a note? I've noticed that recently a lot of these interviews under undefined names has this Y over here that Aubrey's got.
Mhm.
So just maybe we can come back to that. I forgot, I'm just curious what
Sure.
that just started showing up.
Okay, yeah. That's another good question to do after you do this. So yeah, let's just do save and run.
Yeah.
So you can see.
sorry, it's a little deep in the.
Oh, well, that should be okay.
Yeah, good, you put the question IDs in, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, that really wasn't that far.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
And Michelle's question is a really good one. Like, how do we handle that for translation? So if we go back to the playground. So the comma and list function can be translated itself. The way that it works can be replaced for different languages. But a simple option that you can use here is just to put the word or, we're calling a function right there. So after the equal sign, or after and string, before the quotes, we're going to put that word or inside another function. So I don't know if people have kind of caught on to this. We can nest functions, and an argument to one function can be the result of a second function. The function that we're going to use is called word, W-O-R-D. And then we, just like every other function argument, it goes inside round parentheses.
Okay, one of my parentheses is broken.
Nope. So the problem is that you just need them, yeah, around the quotes. Oh, one of the parentheses on your keyboard isn't working?
Yeah, sorry. So I have to paste it. So
You
That
can
is
you can copy it
hilarious.
from the beginning of comma and list, maybe.
I've been there.
so I'm sorry. Is that where it's supposed to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like that. Okay, and just try saving it and refresh and see what happens. Nothing happened because we're in English. So, and there's no translation of that word inside DocAssemble yet. But if we were using, and actually there might be for or, it might be used somewhere else in DocAssemble already. But basically later down the line, we can add a translation for the word or. And then anytime that you put it inside the function word, it's going to show that word being translated. Now, is that going to work in every language? Potentially not. There's obviously languages where you have to match the gender of the thing that you're saying or to. But
I don't think you have to do a gender. I don't think there's a gender for or.
yeah, that's what I was just trying to think. I don't think that's true in Spanish. There might be some other
It's not
languages.
or is not an adjective. You only have to match genders when the words have to agree. You need to match verbs and adjectives, but not conjunctions.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So it would be the word "o" in Spanish, and that will work just fine.
I should look into Hebrew because I know Hebrew has genders for numbers and things like that.
But this would never. I don't think there's any language where or would be. You'd have to adjust the word or.
It might end up being a little grammatically incorrect, but it would probably be understandable to anybody, which is another thing to keep in mind too.
Yeah.
So we could eventually run into a language where that's a problem. And if we did, then we could replace that function so that it does something more like what we want.
Quentin, is this something we want to think about? I mean, is this the kind of thing we want to include so you don't have to go through all the interviews when you're going to translate?
Well, I actually don't think that this instruction here, you can file in these courts, is actually that helpful for anybody. A few people have commented on it that have reviewed our forms. So I think we're going to take it out completely. But also we're going to have the newer court selector, which includes a list of the courts and does the location for you.
So this question will be replaced kind of anyway.
It will be replaced, yeah.
Mhm.
So I would recommend, we can leave this for now, but at some point we're going to go through, and if you customize this screen, we're going to delete your customization and go back to the new court selector.
So Quentin, in this particular interview, some towns have preferred courts. So they want you to get your court order from a certain court. Because the recommendation is, this isn't call the court, this is call your town and find out what court they want you to get the order from. And some
Does-
courts, if you go to some town sites, they tell you what court to go to on the website. They tell you what court to go to.
This is
So-
for the DV protective order specifically?
No, this is for the marriage without delay
Oh, okay.
order.
Oh, that's what this form is. Okay.
Yeah. So,
So you would want to customize it in that case.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So this, I think we talked about, I think they're just not quite finished. This question was going to say, did you already call the town or city clerk where
I
you want
see
to get
that
your
in there, yeah.
license? And then these two sentences, not that you can file, but the two sentences would be conditional depending on whether you said yes or no.
Okay. If you did not call the clerk, find it by using, okay, I see, that makes sense. Yeah, so that's a good reason to customize it.
Mhm.
An open question for this project is, should we have better ways to customize without completely replacing screens? And maybe we should. Because I can think of since that screen is new, the court selector, we might have other improvements. We want to make sure, I wouldn't say, oh, just copy that screen from the new version and use it, because it might get changed over time. But yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to derail you from Teaching Tuesday. I appreciate it.
No, that's not a derailment. That's really the point of this, is to make sure everybody can ask questions if they want to. And actually, I'm trying to remember, someone else had started asking a question, but I can't remember what it was.
Caroline
maybe you
had that
could
question
follow.
about the why.
Oh, the why, yes. Caroline had a question about the why. Do you have an interview that has that, Caroline?
I've just been looking at, I've been starting to download people's interviews for plain language for readability, and I
Okay.
keep seeing them. So let me see if I can find one just off the bat. That's the wrong interview. What's this one? Oh, let's see. Let's see what I've got.
So usually you get something like that when you've included a file that asks for that variable, but that might not actually need it, or something like that.
No.
Yeah, but Michelle, you're
So
talking
that is
not
about
getting
in
a value from
general.
elsewhere.
Yeah.
You're talking about in general. I'm saying it seems like every interview I open now has this undefined why in it.
Yeah.
I'm just
But these were-
curious why that started showing up.
So I'm wondering if it's inside the file or if it's in one of the included files. That is a good point. It's not due to it being an included file. That's the problem, because DocAssemble treats it all as being one big file. That may mean why you couldn't locate it right away.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where. It's just that everything's working. I just wanted to point out, like, I've downloaded, I think, probably 3 or 4 interviews to review. And I mean, like you saw, Aubrey's had the why. I've got the
Right.
I've got the motion to vacate marital home. There's a why in that one. I think I did another one.
Let me see if I can find, okay, so I have one where I can show it to you. So I just was wondering if you had an example for us to look at, and I'll show
Yeah.
you.
I mean, I can show you
Well,
that what
pops
I
up.
have, and you have one too, though, right? Yeah,
Yeah. All right, so
there it is. Yeah,
this is the affidavit of indigency, which has that same
right.
error message. And it's really hard to look for the why, isn't it? Because it's such a
Yeah, because
short
it's
letter.
why.
Which
It's
is why
gonna
you
be from-
never use one-letter variables. All right, I'm done.
Well, this is a counter to that, Michelle, because this is following conventions that people use in programming. So
I know, but I don't use.
you're not going to use a really
either.
long iterator either. This is
Not
something
necessarily true,
where
But okay.
when you create a temporary anonymous function, which you aren't probably going to be doing very much, but you might have it from some code that we're using in the interview somewhere else. In this example right here, I think it's probably coming from the court selector.
Mm-hmm.
In the other interviews too, maybe that's in the file, even though it's not active yet.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's this labeler. So
That
I didn't
makes
actually.
perfect sense because
Yeah.
all of a sudden it started appearing. You know what I mean? So anytime anybody uses the court selector now, you get this in your interview.
Right, and it's not the newest court selector that's final, but what I did do was disambiguate the courts that have the same name. So now
Okay.
every court shows the city after the name
Mm-hmm.
if the name of the city isn't already part of the name of the court.
Court.
So that's for handling cases where there's like 3 superior courts in a lot of counties, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you create a temporary variable, DocAssemble's logic of trying to figure out what names are undefined doesn't work. So you're going to get that kind of notification that it's undefined, even though it really is.
Mm-hmm.
It's just used as a temporary variable. The other time you might get that is if you had a for loop somewhere inside your interview and created a temporary variable that way.
Mm-hmm.
Although DocAssemble might not create that. Let's just take a look and see.
I haven't seen it. I've used fors and loops in a few interviews, and I haven't seen them as I have not seen the temporary variables showing up there. But I just wanted to bring it up because it's the kind
Good to know when you see errors,
yeah,
whether they
and
are actually.
also those are very specific errors. So when people see them, they shouldn't have to worry about them. They just know, oh, this is from the court selector. It'll get resolved once we move to the new court selector.
Right, exactly.
And
It's
this,
not going to
you
get
know,
resolved, though. It's going to always stay there. It's just a problem of DocAssemble's ability to scan through and see what things are
yeah,
defined.
you
and
just
which ones
don't want people spending time trying to figure out why it's there.
aren't. That's a good thought for sure. Let me just do a quick thing. So I'm just going to see if I can trigger that from a for loop just to double check that.
Mhm.
And I should not use y. Oh. Not sure if number is good. Might be reserved.
Oh, there it is. Oh, that's T,
Interesting.
but not Y.
Why is it not letting me use T? Okay, yeah, so it's not a for loop. I think I've seen it inside a docx file when there's a for loop. That might have been the only time that it happens. Maybe it doesn't happen when it's inside the regular interview text. But when you see something like that, and it's like a value that you're using as an iterator or a placeholder, and that can be, you're most likely to use it inside a for loop. You're probably not going to be creating Lambda functions since we haven't talked about what those are, and probably the concept's a little esoteric to people. But those are the times you might see an error message like that in the right-hand variable preview. That isn't something you have to act on. Let me show you like one more scenario where that happens, which kind of reflects a way that we're using the So this whole list here of undefined names is because these variables are defined inside a code block, and we have scan for variables false turned on that code block. So if you're looking in the 209A and you see these kind of red messages, it's a really specific circumstance, but that could be another reason why you see something like that. It's not showing that there's an error. But it's something you should be able to, whenever you see that, you should probably ignore the why, because we've talked about that one. But you should take a minute to see, is there a reason why this is happening, and is it supposed to be happening?
The other one is the preferred court variable. Those are the two, preferred court and Y, right?
Yes, preferred court's a good one as well. So preferred court is never required, but it is referenced inside some of the code. It's inside basic questions. So if you don't have that in your file, which a lot of interviews don't, that turned out to not be that useful a variable. So it's used in this housing court interview version of the question that we don't use anymore. So I could probably get rid of that error for everybody by just deleting that block. We're not using it anymore. Everywhere else we check to see if it's defined first. And actually we're not even using it here. Yeah. That was one of our early ideas. And I don't think we want to default people's courts anymore, especially if we have the ability to show them the 5 or so courts that match their, it's not even going to be 5 courts for most cases. Most of the time, you're only going to be able to file in 3 courts. And BMC and district is really just 1 court. So letting people choose from a list of 3 is not as hard as letting them choose from a list of like 60 courts. So I don't think using the preferred court is necessary for us anymore. Any other things people have run into that they want us to try to work through now? And again, I definitely try to make this responsive to questions that you actually have. So anything that you've run into that anyone else might want benefit from, especially.
I wouldn't, if nobody has anything and you don't want an agenda, I wouldn't mind going through trying to do texting multiple people for their signatures.
I suspect that might be kind of complicated, but you're saying you've already done it for emails?
We've got it working for emails. I haven't looked at it in a week and a half, but we have it working for emails. And we were trying to figure out, I wish I had I don't know where the code is for it. But yeah, okay, never mind. I'll try and do that separately, and then maybe we can, it'll take too long to find it. I just thought if you wanted to just do it from scratch.
No, that's okay. Yeah, if you want to just take a minute to find the code, we can look at it.
Okay, let me see if I can find.
And we're not starting from scratch. You have the logic already in place. We're just trying to have it text instead of email. You're muted, Caroline.
Because I'm talking to myself.
Okay.
Just take a minute here. Go ahead and talk amongst you. Maybe we can come back to it. Go ahead. I won't distract you. And let me see if I can figure out what this is.
Anything that someone's been wondering about that I can answer for you? So what Caroline is talking about, I'll just do a little introduction while you find the file. So remember our discussion on the Slack, is for their interview, they want to have multiple signers. They want each person to be able to sign individually, remotely, without having to be in the same place. The question is, how can you get the form for people to sign at the right time? Jonathan really nicely shared some code, Jonathan, the author of DocAssemble, to do that. And it's not the exact thing we need, but it was like a really good model to start from, essentially. So the thing that makes it tricky is that...
Are you aware that you're not sharing your screen?
I'm aware that I'm not sharing my screen, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not actually on any
Sure.
the code yet. I am looking through our Slack history to see if I can find when Jonathan answered that question.
Yeah. My problem is that Lily put together a whole bunch of examples, and Mariah might have put it in hers, but then not pushed to GitHub, or I just can't remember where who did
Okay.
what when.
Okay. Well, another thing we can do is we can just see. It does use some kind of advanced concepts. So the thing about that code is that it needs to work out of order, basically, right? So our interview right now is linear for the most part. Almost everything is linear. So, but when you send out a file for like maybe 5 people to sign it, you don't know what order they're going to sign it in. So it can't be like passing the token. There's an old networking technology called token ring where like everything, it worked in a circle. You'd eventually get it back to the beginning, but it had to have an exact number of loops, and you couldn't do things out of order. It kept having to go around the circle. So that doesn't really match the way people would want to do that. I mean, because if you get everybody the form, they're all looking at it. It might take the same amount of time to have a chance to decide, yep, I'm ready to sign it, and to click sign. But if you are sharing it where it's a linear process, everybody might take the same amount of time to do it, but you're suddenly multiplying times 5. Instead of everyone taking an hour to sign it, and that can happen at the same time, it's 5 hours instead of 1 hour to get the signatures. What do you think, Caroline? Are we gonna?
I think,
Should
I'm
we-
guessing, we actually tried it. So I'm wondering if it might be on Mariah's GitHub. Because I don't know how else we would have,
Well, Caroline,
probably, actually.
sorry.
Go ahead, Maeve.
While Caroline looks, I just wanted to ask 2 questions. The one was about adding that kind of last part that we were talking about with Mike and Tyler that Mia's already added, the submission to the court. Is that just a case of copying and pasting code in there, or how does one actually go about doing that?
Great question. So let's see. I'll
Thanks.
share my screen. So for the most part, it should be a copy and paste thing. And the one place where it might not work as a copy and paste thing is if you're working in a docx file, because
Okay.
your variable names won't be lined up with the ones that the copy and paste is kind of expecting and looking for.
Okay.
So this is where I would start. Like it's definitely one of the things that we have as a finish checklist thing.
Right. But it's something that we kind of want to get people to add in now because, as I said, this is something that the finished carpentry is more supposed to be like you're checking that that's been done. Not, we don't want to make that like a huge job in itself, right?
No, you're right. Yeah. So we do want more people to start doing it a little bit earlier stage. So
Okay.
the good thing about this is I'll show you now where to find it. So if we click
Okay.
on this link here that's in this checklist, same card as the checklist. This is kind of an overview of the things that we need to have. And really what we need to do is to define form to sign, final form to file. Those are the ones that you won't necessarily have. And let's see. If you copy this line of code, this download screen that has the send to
Preview
court
and final
button in it.
download screen.
Yeah, actually, you don't need the preview screen. You can, but you don't need it. You could use the one that's already there in your code.
Okay.
Then once you have this, it's really just this line here that you need to have in there that handles this process, which does the sending to court.
Right, and that defines that, what's it, the form?
It's looking for a file that's called final form to file, which
Okay.
is, if you're using the interview generator code, it's going to be scanning through and finding that automatically for you.
Okay.
And building it. So you don't even have to do anything probably other than just copy this this one block, and it should work right away for you, except for you have to change these variables that are placeholders.
And that'll be that'll change to, like, for example, ours is like civil action cover sheet, and then I think it's like 00026 or something.
Mhm.
So we just paste in that attachment
For
and
the
you're not
attachment code line there, yes.
Okay.
And that's the only thing where it says placeholder is that's the only place you have to change it.
Okay, perfect. So I'll give that a try and then report back. And the other question is just a quick one. It's about kind of like UX, I guess. We've got a couple of instances where you'd either say yes or no. And initially it was like yes or either clicking yes or no would take you to the next page. That's the only thing you interact with on the page. And we changed those to radio buttons because we could. And by we, I mean me, because that's the only thing I could do at the time. And now I'm thinking that it's actually 2 clicks instead of 1, because you have to click the radio button and then you have to click continue. So I'm wondering if the UX would be better if we just do yes, no, revert it back to yes, no. Like the questions are something like, does this matter involve collection of debt? Is this matter class action? Stuff like that.
So stuff I've heard from UX people is that consistency is more important sometimes than speeding up some screens, so that keeping the radio buttons yes, no, and an extra click is better unless all your interviews just going to say, yes, no at the bottom. That's one of the, what I'm saying is it's not a clear win, right? It's not a clear answer which one. It's more of a discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, just so everyone can see what we're talking about here exactly. So I'll just do a little quick.
That's something we're going to try and test with users, right? Because we made that decision to pick yes, no, and then the usability people brought it up. They suggested that next might be better, but I like yes, no better because it's less work for the user.
Well,
So
it's
this is
less
what the yes, no looks
physical
like.
work. It's less physical work in some ways.
Yeah.
And
Which isn't always the work that we're worried about, right? If usability people are telling us that one thing is better than another, I tend to defer to them because I assume have experience. Otherwise, why would we be?
Well, I think
they've done the user testing.
They do have experience, but I also have experience, and I've seen usability experts say do this, and I've been in a group of our target users, and they use it differently. So I think that's why we ask them to do it. But I also think I have my own experience watching our target users use stuff, and they don't always fit with the usability people's recommendations.
yeah,
So,
I think this is a really good discussion. I think we probably are going to run into more things like this where people have to make choices. And I think the answer is we should probably come up with our own conventions and stick with them.
And then we explain why we pick those things. I mean, one very good example is all the Nielsen people. I'm not going against this, but one recommendation is to chunk your text when you're doing readability. Chunk your text, put headings in, and the rationale behind is because when people read, they skim. However, low literacy people cannot skim. They read every single word. That isn't a reason not to use headings, but that is a good example of the rationale doesn't work there.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that it's true for the usability folks too. So the review we had from Bentley, it is from the Court UX team, but I think that we have to acknowledge that their training and experiences are mostly not going to be with our users. Like, I don't think that there's a huge group of usability researchers who are focusing on poor and low literate people.
Right.
So,
in addition to it, and I mean, the other things about that is, I had just been reading about the guy who's in charge of the usability department at Bentley, and he's got all kinds of, kudos from all over the place. And then I saw that he was behind the new design of mass.gov. And these aren't low literate people, but I've heard so many criticisms of mass.gov, and I like mass.gov. I think it's clean. I like the way it works, but I also have a few reservations about it. And I also wonder, my impression is that the usability team we have that aggregate, but I suspect that a lot of them are graduate students. So they're not out there testing, as Quentin suggested, with our target users.
Hmm.
So I think we just take it with we take it as an educated recommendations and suggestions, but it's not the word of God.
Exactly. Yeah. So we should reach our own decision about that, and it doesn't have to be left up to each individual interview author. But I don't think we have to also defer only to the identified experts because of the reasons that we've kind of covered. It's very much the case that we should pay special attention to it.
Yeah.
And there are going to be a lot of things that they surface that are things we didn't even think about. And I mean, those are almost always going to be something we should listen to as a first pass. But if we've thought about something and decided against it, it's just a chance for us to revisit our choice rather than to say we're going to definitely do what the expert said.
Yeah, and I think we come down to user testing. I mean, that's
where I was going to say.
Decide for us.
And this sounds like something that would be really good to document, so that people questioning those design decisions in the future have a place to look and say, I see why that decision was made. The decision to deviate from what is viewed as the recommended UI decision today, right?
And the other thing to keep in mind is like what's recommended UI today is different from recommended UI 10 years ago, because part of it is consistency with what other people are doing on the internet. So what people are familiar with has a lot to do with reducing cognitive load, rather than, you can't necessarily say there's an objective easiest to use method. It has something to do with what people see elsewhere and get familiar with.
I think if we have good reasons and good findings about what we discover about low literacy users and our audience in general, I think that would be incredibly valuable to people moving forward, and would, as opposed to just we decided to do it this way, then I just think that would be incredibly valuable. That's
all. Well, I actually have a question about that, because Quentin, you did ask people to comment on the report. You put it in, that's for everybody, right? You put it in the UX channel.
I did, yes.
Right. And so I made some issues, and I actually had the same question that Michelle's bringing up, where we've already resolved some of those. Should we make a GitHub issue and then explain why our rationale for doing it? Or that's what I was wondering about, whether we've already addressed the question. What would be a good way or place to document that?
I think that the answer is that we should create a separate document to track choices. And that review could be the starting point for our style guide, where we take the things they're saying and, oh, this is going to come up in every interview, let's always do it this way, or this is going to come up as feedback in every case, and we want to lay out our reasons for why we're not following that feedback.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Yeah. And there are other things that will go in there, right? Like there are things that aren't covered by the review that we've decided as style choices that should go in there. We could start with just that.
Okay.
I don't know if people have a thought of where that should go, but maybe a Google Doc seems to be the most accessible for now.
Yeah.
But eventually it might be nice to have it be a markdown file.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, it would be a markdown file in the virtual court repository where everything lives.
Right.
Max Headroom is
I know.
looking questionable.
Okay, so my partner Lance is actually on here, and David, that wasn't an attack on you. That was just so we were
calling
just
me out.
So Lance was we were just looking at whether it's one of the issues I raised in our doc, whether it's better to have radio buttons with yes, no, and then a continue button to go to the next screen, or whether it's better to have just yes, no, and the yes, no will continue to the next screen. So that's what this conversation is about. We didn't settle on one. Hey, what? Just the upshot of what
we can
vote on that conversation.
So we made a choice initially to use the buttons as a preferred style. I think if we just keep it that way for now and then do some user testing and then change it, then it'll be consistent change throughout.
Okay, perfect. So Lance, I'm going to change back our ones where it's like, for example, is this a jury claim? Like it has a jury claim being made, collection of debt,
Right.
all of that. So I'll change that back to where there's nothing else to interact with on the screen. I'll change that back to yes, no, and then
Okay.
the other thing, as I mentioned, is we're going to move our thing across to our own package, which I'll do today. Okay, that's all my questions.
Okay. What other things have people been running into where they're not sure the reasoning for something? I could explain, or what I mean is like how a function works, or how a method or an object or a little bit of code works, or something they're trying to do that they haven't been able to figure out how to do yet. And I really want to invite any of the students who are on the call or other people who joined to do that, because I think it's probably the best way to learn is from the specific problems they run into. Oh, and I also see that Rena is on the call. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself. Rena
Oh.
is someone who worked with me on MADE, one of the other brains behind that particular project. If you want to take a second to let people who don't know who you are to introduce yourself.
Where is she? Oh, there she is. Maybe her microphone isn't working. Hi, Rena.
We might be in the background. She might not have caught us.
The other thing is obviously Caroline found the link to the GitHub thing that she was looking for. So
I did. It doesn't have any of the texting in. I actually sent a message to Mariah. This is what she told me, but I don't see it here.
So you found the repository, but not that code isn't.
I think maybe it's here. I'm just not. This is definitely the last one we did, but I don't see any of the.
Here, I'll send it.
Oh, she's
Someone signed
there.
it. I didn't look. Yeah, I signed on. I'll go look for it.
Okay.
Rena says her mic doesn't work.
Oh.
Oh, okay. All right. You get to reprieve for now, Rena.
Maybe you can just introduce her. I mean, is there more than that Rena helped you with MADE?
Yeah, so that's pretty much the whole thing. But
Okay.
yeah, so Rena's spent a year working with me on MADE and was really instrumental in having that be a successful project. So
Fantastic.
glad to see you, Rena. Pick us up later.
Well, everyone will work on it. Is she in law school now? Are you in law school now, Rena?
I think the answer is is no. I was working at a housing nonprofit, is my memory, unless that's
But
changed in the last half year.
Not
which is
yet,
possible.
haha.
All right.
Very organic laughter there.
Okay. Well, let's just introduce people to the very basic concept of objects then, and what they are and how to use them and how they work. So 15 minutes is not going to be very much time to do that, but we'll do a little bit of it. So I've linked this page into the Slack, the assembly line code channel, or possibly on the main assembly line channel. I'm not sure which one I used. And you can start to read this later, but I want you to just think of what we've covered so far. So last week, I think we talked about, or 2 weeks ago, we talked about lists and how lists are a way to store information that's repeated. Objects are a way to store multiple pieces of information together in one place. Who here has heard of objects and classes before? You might want to share a little bit about what they understand the definition of it to be. And a ringer is okay. Well, I like to think of a class as being a blueprint, essentially, for something that I'm going to be using again and again and again. Something that has some kind of common attributes in common. This may not be that helpful to people, but if you've studied philosophy, then thinking of classes as being like a Platonic ideal for something might make sense as well. A metaphor that one of my students got from me, which I think is really easy to understand for most people, is the class as a spreadsheet. So we talked about how a list is like a spreadsheet with just 2 columns. You can think of a class as being like the column labels in a spreadsheet. So here we have an example of a class that represents an apple. This first column is representing the actual variable name for that apple. So we might call it apple 1 or apple 2. And then we have different features of it. So every apple has these same kind of features, right? It has a weight, a color, a variety, maybe a number of calories that it has. And when we're using an object or we're using a spreadsheet and we're capturing a bunch of information about things in the field, we could just write a separate page of paper for each thing and say, okay, I want to describe this perfectly. So I'm going to write down all the things that I know about this apple. And then I'm going to go on to the next apple and describe all the things I know about that one. It's really helpful really early to start having labels for that different pieces of information so that we can do it in a way that is easier to synthesize. If we wanted to get the information about all of our apples, we're going to use the same kind of headings and column labels for each of those things that we're collecting that are the same thing. We're not going to say like apple's color one time and then we're not going to use like synonyms for these. We're going to try to use the same consistent labels for that same type of information about each thing each time that we collect it. Really relevant to our project, of course, is another metaphor that I found helpful for thinking about a class as a blueprint, is maybe thinking of it as like a blank form that you're going to fill out. Forms also have labels in standard places, gathering the same type of information each time. And you could think of an object as being one copy of a form, and the class definition as being the form without any information filled in it yet. One thing that is a little bit unique about a class inside the computer programming concept is that not only can a class have information it stores, that information is called an attribute, but classes can have methods as well. So methods are functions that are part of the object itself. So here I'm giving an example of a method that you might have on your Apple class. It's a little contrived, but a method can use a bunch of pieces of information at once and act on it in some way. You could have, there's no reason you wouldn't have a separate function to do that, but having it as part of the class's definition is just like a really convenient way to group those things together. Let's think about an isRipe method. So an isRipe method maybe would look at a couple of the attributes of the apple, like maybe we look at the variety, the date that it's planted, and then it would return information to us about whether it is ripe or not. So it would be a true or false method. When you write a definition, the class's definition, something that you can do with a class is that it can inherit from another class. And this is a concept that's a little tricky for a lot of people, but I just want to point out that we think of how Platonic definitions for things and can kind of inherit from each other all the time, right? So we think of things in terms of similarities and differences, and those can overlap. If we were to start at the really big picture, we might have a class that's called fruit. That's one of Jonathan's favorite types of examples to use when he's doing coding. And
oh, are we going to get into the plurals again?
No, we won't have to get into plurals at all because we're not worrying about lists. We're just talking about like how inheritance works right now.
Sorry, that
So
was an
this
inside
diagram
joke for
kind
all
of
the people
shows
who work.
you
Yeah, sorry.
how inheritance works in time, and if we had a fruit class. So maybe every fruit has some things in common, right? Fruit is a kind of food. All fruit have calories and weight and color, maybe. And maybe our apple method has a lower level of specificity. So all apples have more in common than all fruit have in common, right? And we can even go down one more level, and maybe we have a class called Macoun or Cortland that is a more specific variety of apple, but it's still describing many apples at once. It's a definition for a whole category of apple. It's not one individual apple in the world. When you want to kind of avoid having to write code, boilerplate code over and over and over again, inheritance is really helpful. But it's also really useful to know for the kinds of classes that we're using inside our project that sometimes one type of object inherits features from another one. And even if you don't see it explicitly written out, there may be some features that they have in common that are just kind of assumed to be there. One of the conventions for working with objects is usually the class name is written in something called Pascal case. So we use initial capital letters. You probably have noticed that in most of the time in our Python conventions, we're using variables that are all lowercase that have an underscore between them. And if you are looking at something and it starts with a capital letter, it's probably the definition of a class. So that can be kind of a clue for you. That's just a convention. There's no rule that says you have to follow that, but it's something that might be useful when you're trying to read someone else's code that's already been written, that you can see that. The thing that you've all been running into and have all been using throughout is this dot notation. So we're using, for example, anyone tell me an example of an object that we're using from what we've talked about so far, if you can think of one that uses the dot as part of the variable name.
Children.name, isn't it children.name.first? Opposing party.name.first?
Yeah, those are really good examples. So those are objects. And that's part of why I want you to get a little bit of like understanding of what they are, even though it can be a big concept. Just knowing that they are objects might be helpful for you. So that dot notation is something that happens for objects. So what would be the object name in that example that Caroline just gave, and what would be the attribute name? Maeve muted really quickly.
I know. I got scared. Your eyes are so good, Quentin. I don't know. I think the object is like, say, child, and the attributes are name. Or
Yeah,
is it the other way around? Okay.
that's right.
Cool.
Yeah, so attribute is the name. Anybody have any other insight? And so actually, this might not be a fair question, so I'll give it to everybody. The object, an object can store all kinds of values, including other objects. So the individual object, that's the class that we're using for people, itself can have attributes that are objects, and it does. Name is one of those. So this is something that you and Lance Maeve were running into on the code channel earlier. You were getting the definition of a person's address, if I remember right.
Yeah. So we ended up going plaintiffs, and then 0 dot address, and then we put a further dot address.
So what do you have any clues for like maybe what was going on from what we've just talked about? And that again is like a lot of synthesis that might not be a fair question, but.
Well, the thing that I kind of play around with in the logic block, I just add in different variables until it pulls the question that I want. So I know that dot address is, I think it's specifically the street address or one part of the address. So instead of just asking for the whole address, as the address as a whole, it was asking for a specific part of the address, which then made everything else get asked. And that was my very basic understanding, but I'm not sure. I couldn't
No,
quite figure out the logic behind that.
Yeah, that's a good insight. That's exactly what's going on. So when we're referencing an object inside a code block, and let me pull up one that's a better example of that. Let me see. Okay. So this is one of the examples from the advanced DocaCon training, which is a little bit funky, but it's a short one, so it might be helpful to use anyway. All right. When we create objects inside our DocAssemble interviews, we have to have an objects block like this somewhere. It's not the absolute only way to create an object, but it's what we normally do. In our code block, if we're referencing the object's name, like let's say we referenced assets, what it would be doing is making sure this code block here, this objects block rather, gets run. You see here we have two object blocks that define assets. It's not a special, it's got to keep going until it finds a definition of this variable. And this objects block is one way to do it. This objects block is another way to do it. So when you refer to other parties 0.address, you are making sure that the address object that was itself an attribute of users or other party 0 was defined. And it was essentially doing this equivalent of this, is saying, okay, I'm going to make sure the object's defined. Well, before the object being defined isn't something you ever see on the screen. You don't have to have a question that defines the object in that particular case. It was just going to be something that happens in the background through a block like this. And you might run into that kind of thing if you're not sure that something is an attribute that you can fill in, or one that is happening with code. That's just something to keep in mind that you may run into sometimes. The two that you're going to run into a lot are the name. So if we had, let me give you an interview that actually asked for somebody's name. So I'm going through this example here. It's this interview that's in this section called the individual class. You can copy that and run it in your own playground if you want. And question on the chat. Okay. And let me just take a look here. Let's make sure this is the right kind. So we do have a code block here that controls the order of the questions, right? So let's save and run it. You can see here it asks for our name, and we're referencing name.first. But if I referenced client.name, it is saying, let's make sure the name object of the client object is defined, which doesn't require showing anything on the screen.
Oh, that makes a lot more sense.
Now, one thing that is happening is that that might be kind of hidden, because here I'm actually referencing the object in a way that does put it on the screen. So when I reference client, it needs client.name and the attributes of client.name to be defined. So sometimes that error can be a little bit hidden.
Do you have any idea why it was? I mean, Lance, I'm pretty sure the address was being asked at first. I can't remember.
Yeah, we never, all of a sudden it just stopped being, it disappeared.
Yeah, it was so weird. And we didn't change anything in the logic block. I don't know why. mean, it works
Nothing
now.
related to the address anyway.
It could be because you had an option to skip undefined variables on, maybe.
Yeah, we did.
Something that you might have changed recently.
Yes,
Got
that's
that.
probably exactly what we did.
Okay, thanks, Quentin. The other thing that I think is quite important from this video is the adding of the the submission to court. So I think that that's going to be something that's going to help a lot of people. So we just remember that it was in this video,
Okay.
how we did that, because I think a lot of people are going to come up with that question.
Totally. And actually, if someone is trying that out and runs into other problems that they have, I'm sure that there's some gaps in this information. So feel free to flag that. And I would like to make sure to flesh that out so it is more descriptive of how to do things.
Okay,
But
perfect.
part of it is knowing what things are missing, and it's easy for me not to realize what things are missing in it.
Well, we'll give it a try on our interview, and then let you know what was confusing, or what, if there was anything that we were confused about or that we found missing.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Quentin. Really appreciate it.
All right. Other questions that people had about, again, we just kind of dipped our toes into objects and how objects work. I like to have people do a lot more hands-on stuff with it, but I won't hold people to do that now. I think I might go and take a look and have a more digestible take on it for people soon. But did this raise any questions for people? Apparently we do not have a hard out at 2, so we can stay for a little bit longer if people had questions about what we just covered.
I'm pretty much all good. I think the questions will come when I actually start to do the stuff, as usual. So, yeah, thank you.
We missed our opportunity. Mariah found the code.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well,
no.
we could switch to that
Next
topic.
time.
I'm okay with doing that.
Do you have time to do that?
Yeah, I mean, that will help move that interview forward. I think it's a good way to spend your
Yeah.
time. So.
Okay, so let's see. Where should I, we don't have it in GitHub. Where should we stick it so that we can share it with you? We could put it in Slack as a snippet, or I don't know.
Sure, that makes sense. I was thinking we could actually look at it in your interview as well. If you want to look at
We have it external from our interview. We just we're trying to make this function work, and then we're going to move it into the interview.
Okay, but is it
Right.
in your playground somewhere too?
Yeah.
Okay,
Do you have
let's
it in your
look at
you
this
have it
stuff.
in your playground, Mariah?
Yeah, I can.
Can you?
Let me share.
Yeah, please.
Does anything else change in your interview? Because right now it's aimed at advocates, or
Oh, it's
is it-
completely, I mean, I wouldn't say completely different, but it's pretty different.
okay.
All
You know
right.
that you're sure.
Yeah, you have your email there. You could probably edit that out.
Or your secrets.
Can you see? Are you seeing the playground?
Yeah,
Yes,
we're
your
seeing it.
playground.
Okay. I'm not sure what you want to look at, so you want me to run it?
Sure, let's start that.
Okay. So let me make Zoom go away first. So
Yeah, we got the
I'm on my
multiple
way.
emails working. It was a little bit of a delay to get it, but we did get that. Was kind of a celebration. And then I think we tried to do the same thing with texting that we did with the emails, and I never got the I never got it. We sent it to me, right? And I never got the text.
Oh,
So
interesting.
we kept this as witness, even though we're going to change this to other defendant because this is just our practice. But
Other tenant, yeah, it was a co-tenant. Yeah, this is just to get the function working.
so this we did, whether you pick email or text.
Mhm.
So I'll just do email. Do you want me to actually send it to you?
Yeah, send it to me. Yeah.
Oh.
Are you gonna do? Okay, so we've got the. Do you want to do the email because we know that's working, or do you want to do the text that's not working?
Well, let's start with the text that's not working. Let's see what we might be able to learn some information about why it's not working, either by reasoning
Got
or
some
log file.
229
your number, Carol.
229 7163.
Everyone take note for midnight calls to Caroline.
Yeah.
We'll just blur that out.
And of course, being a mother, I always have my phone turned on. Okay.
All right.
Whoops, wrong phone.
Well, let's just take a look at the log file. I think that might be a really good thing.
That's right. No messages.
Okay. Okay. Wait. So would you want me to look at what?
You should be able to check the
First?
log file if you look here and then
Log.
log.
What is it called?
Log.
Log file?
Yeah, it's under package management.
It's actually under
Annette,
logs.
Did you
It's
click
called
package
logs.
management? No,
No.
in the list underneath. You don't go to package
Oh,
management.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I've never looked at log file. So.
All right, so let's try see if we see any messages related to sending a text message. So those would probably be at the end of this log because it just happened.
At the very bottom, you mean, of the?
Very bottom is what I mean, yeah.
This is the bottom.
Okay.
I
So
can make my head go away here. This would be easier. Okay.
all right, so let's see.
Wait, is this the right?
Undefined error.
Stay.
Not seeing anything about messaging. Let's also scroll up a little bit. And I think it would be in this log generally, any messages about things that were sent or weren't sent. So we don't even see that it tried to send a text message, I think.
Mhm.
But the other place I look that might have log messages that are useful is the worker log. So let's just check there too, under docassemble.log in the top left. You can choose which log file you're using. You're
Go
looking
Do
at.
you guys know any way to make all the pictures go away? Because my screen's not huge and this is
You
going to
can-
slow me
there's-
down. So
On the right-hand side, you can make the.
like on Zoom, I'm trying to get rid of everybody's
First-
heads.
First of all, if you there's a bar at the top of everybody's heads, and you can pick. There's an option of 1 bar, 2 bars, or 3 bars. So try the 1 bar.
Okay, I think. Okay, I got it. Where am I looking?
See where Quentin put the
On-
blue arrow top left-ish?
Yeah.
Oh,
Docassemble.log, click on that, and you can change it to worker.log. So if you wanted to know how to read these, the .log.1, those progressively get older in time. So without
Okay.
the numbers is the newest one always. So let's look at worker.log. I don't believe that, so that is for things that happened in the background process. I don't think that text messaging does. So I don't think you're going to see anything in here, but it's another place to check sometimes if you're like, oh, I don't know why something's going on. So let's again scroll down to the bottom and see if there's anything in there. Okay, so I'm not seeing any messages that have to do with sending a text message. So let's look at your code and see if we can just reason to figure out what's going on
Okay.
in the playground, yeah.
Do you want me to stay in the playground? I usually look at this in VS Code.
Oh, VS Code will, yeah, it'll be easier for us to see the whole thing there. So that's a great idea.
So. It is not open.
The test tell you? Oh, there you go. You found it.
Okay, this is it.
Okay. So I noticed something when you had just scrolled through earlier,
Okay.
which I think it might end up being just that simple thing. So let's see. So here we have emails _sent, right?
Mhm.
And if you scroll down a bit, you have a code block which sets email
Email sent equals true.
equals true. Right. Now, I don't see anything that says SMS sent. So can we see your code block that sends the cell?
SMS
There's
the
send
dot
SMS.
send.
Well, let's look at your
So
block
we
that
have
does
send.
send SMS. So that looks like it's going to be pretty similar to this one here. Send underscore SMS.
Okay. So
Now
right
be
there,
another one, right? This is the
Okay.
order.
right here. Line
Okay.
37.
Yeah, so we don't have anything in this block that ever makes it be used. So
Ah,
it's not mandatory. There's no way to link to reference it. So I think we just need to have some way to do that.
like that.
Well, we could put it inside our mandatory block, but anybody tell me any problems that might be caused by doing that?
Well, you've got where you have the code, user code, signatories, gather, background actions, send out for signature. When you put it in the other code block, because it's if you do send SMS, then you always have to do it, right? Is that what you're? And you're giving people the choice
Yeah.
of whether they want to send it or whether they want to. But actually, you already have an emails.
Yeah, so
sent.
could we say either, tell it to do
you
either
do one
or?
or the other, so you're going to get stuck in there, right?
Yeah,
But then you don't want to do that because what if there's no co-defendants?
That
We don't
too.
want that in our alt.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
it's like if there are co-defendants, then email or SMS.
But if you that just calls that block, right? That has emails. What is that? What's the block emails underscore sent? Is that the one that sends them or just says that it's been sent?
So if we were just trying to trace what Jonathan's code does there, so like this whole block here
Mhm.
is the logic that gets triggered when you click a button. Actually, no, that happens in the regular workflow, sorry. It's when line 23 runs, it will run the code block that starts at line 30 through to the end. So what we really need to look at is this, the background action send out for signature. And that's looking for an event that's labeled send out for signature. So let's see if we can find that next.
Right here, 133.
Okay, so in here, we're trying to define a variable called witness.notified.
Mhm.
And we see that code block's right underneath here. So user.notified.
Yeah.
Sorry, I moved.
Fine. It's okay. I'll get rid of my annotations. I think this is where we want to have our if statement in line 141. So instead of saying send email, we're going to have it be checking whether we need to send an email to this person or send a text message to that person.
Oh, wait a minute. This is to user. I don't think this is the one we want. We want to co-defendant. To witness.
Witness.
That's what we're using.
Oh, you're right. Okay, so it's witness.notified probably.
Oh yeah, it's the one
Or
right
witness
above.
is I.notified.
Yeah. Where is that? Oh, there it is.
Right here. Looks like
Line
you've already
40,
started that.
right? Yeah.
You
Yeah.
already,
So if,
looks like you've already done this.
yeah.
Yeah, send SMS.
Oh yeah.
Looks like you've already done the right logic. This is just what I would do.
But we didn't do it right somehow.
This is very interesting. Yeah, okay, let's see.
Well, the thing is where, oh no, that's users signatories. You see where it says email sent in 31, that code before? We don't have we have email sent equals true, but we don't have SMS sent equals true. When you're gathering the,
That's true, but I don't think we.
but that's just sending, isn't it? It's just it's sending. It doesn't matter. They don't care. It doesn't care how you send it. It's just that you sent it, right?
Yeah, it's just making sure that that code block runs, which, even though it's called emails sent, we've changed it
Right.
so it's doing something other than emailing now.
Well, you've got signatories gather, so it is gathering signatories.
Yep, that
So
that
that's
works.
working. If it's gathering signatories, does that not mean the code is working?
It does. Yeah, this is interesting. So the only thing I'm wondering here is things don't work correctly in blocks that are like this, where you use a background action if they're not defined in advance. So we got to ask this question. Are there any of these variables that aren't defined yet? Okay, the template maybe. Can we find the interview link template?
So you want me to search for template?
Let's look for interview link. And we know it's going to be at least 3 places.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it's
There it
Those
is.
are-
No, it's in
Oh, it's right there.
37,
Okay. We should've just-
41 and in the template.
It was the third repetition of it. I think that was the one we wanted. There we go. So user.name.text. Those all seem like they would have been defined. Here is one place where usually I try to avoid using the need statement, but it could end up solving a problem for you.
So in that first code, you say need template interview link, need interview link.
I'm also let's look at how this template is created. Template equals witness.email _ template. So let's try looking for witnesses I. Oh. Okay, that's one of the problems I think here.
Singular and plural. We had that problem with our emails. We had we had witness instead of witnesses, or witnesses instead of witness.
Yeah, I think
see.
that's the problem here.
Well,
Witness.
wait a sec. That's the email that was working,
Oh.
but that may be the
Is the
same.
list called witness?
I think the list is witnesses. I don't know. I think it's witnesses.
All right. Let's look at the objects block and see if we can figure that out. Witnesses is the plural.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That might be the problem too. Yeah, let's make, those should all be witnesses the same way in this block, I believe.
So let me search for
So there is no witness I.
what, show me which ones.
Would
No.
never, okay, so witness would exist as a variable because of the weird way that Python does for loops. After you ran through witnesses, for witness and witnesses, witness isn't ever gotten rid of, it still exists.
Oh, so 2 equals, right. So that
Yeah.
should be witnesses.
Anytime you're using bracket I, it's definitely going to be witnesses.
Right.
So we want to change all of those.
Okay. What about, so here.
Yep,
too as
there
well.
as well.
And then what about witness.email?
You can look for witnesses. You can look for witness dot and witness bracket, and you might be able to find them.
Yeah.
Okay. But should I change line 44?
Yeah, and it appears twice on that line. I mean, you have it highlighted now all the times a witness appears, so that actually is a pretty good job of catching it.
10 of 67. So
But it's really just in that code block, I think, that we have to worry about it for now.
This is for witness.
That's okay for witness and witnesses. That's right.
But line 129, right? Is this witnesses?
Yeah, witness.code. No, it wouldn't be.
Okay. And line 135, witness notified.
Oh, this is
No,
the
that-
weird thing he's doing to make it random. Okay.
So should I change 135? Witness notified?
He's thinking. I think he's thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah.
Oh.
No, it's not going to be turned into witnesses for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at this code here where it's setting a random attribute on every witness. I guess that's kind of like a password for that person. So when they come back to the interview, you know that it's doing it on the right interview.
That's what the dot code is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a password basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's giving like a 10-letter random string of letters. Let's look at your template now. So you could search for template : space, and then I think you probably have 2 templates. Okay. This is the email template. Let's look at that. Oh, that's the one that goes to the user, not the person who's trying to get signature.
So there isn't one going. Oh, okay, yeah.
Here we go. Where it says, please click here. Can we scroll down a little bit? So where does the sign URL come from? I think it's probably using like interview URL action or something like that. But let's just see.
Yeah, I think it is using interview URL.
Interview
Yes.
URL action, I think specifically. Can you see where we define .sign URL? So you can just look for .sign URL and see where else it's referenced. Okay. All right, that's fine.
URL.
And where's the other template block? You probably already, it's probably almost exactly the same as the email template, right? It should be.
Hopefully. That's email, interview,
It
link.
didn't matter that that thing said equals witness before? Sorry, maybe I missed it. Signatories, witness code
I
equals
wonder if
witness?
I don't know if we have a text
Yeah, I don't think we do, Carolyn.
email template.
We
for-
didn't do one
Yeah.
for text. So maybe
Yeah,
that's the
that's probably-
problem.
So maybe that's
Oh.
why we didn't get it, because we didn't have
Yeah.
a template, so it's not sending it.
Yeah,
And
we
because it's in
didn't
the
create a
backend
template.
document, it's not triggering an error. You can see sometimes.
What
But it
is
would
line
show up in the
29?
worker.log.
Say that again, Quentin? What'd
It
you say?
should show up in the worker.log generally.
You mean that if we sent it and it, even if it doesn't have a template, just the fact that we sent it, it's not sending?
Right. Yeah. So let's look at that part of your code
Which part?
where you actually try and do the send SMS one more time.
Okay.
You have a couple of places you're doing it, so
Yeah.
we'll be able to find the right one, I think. Okay, we have link cell. That part's right. So template equals interview _ link.
Oh, right. So what we did it right. So we have one template, right?
Yeah, it's right here. Interview _
Interview link.
Okay, so this will take them to the interview, but you're not getting the text. So you were probably going to come back and refine that later once you confirmed you could get the interview, right? But yeah, you probably want to mirror what it's doing in the send email template.
So we've got an email and a SMS. So would those be 2 different templates? So we'd have,
you probably want to have a similar but shorter and more concise.
right. So we'd have like the template in SMS would be SMS interview link. And the template for the email would be email interview link.
Right. And this is interesting because rather than using a standalone variable, he made it an attribute of the witnesses list, which I find a little confusing.
Hmm.
It's not witnesses bracket I. Each user doesn't get their own template. It's one template that's attached to the list as an attribute, unless that's a typo. I don't know.
Is that a common practice in Python to put attributes onto lists? Like not ones that are on the prototype, right? Like just straight onto
You
the
can't,
list.
as far as I know, I don't think you can actually add random attributes to objects that aren't part of the object's definition in Python. That's just a docassemble object thing.
Okay, so it's just a doc assemble practice.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think it makes sense for the same reasons we're talking about other types of attributes being linked together. But here, it's a little confusing because you don't know whether it's meant to be an attribute of the list or it's meant to be of one of the items of the list. You definitely can't access random attributes of a list, a native list. It's only possible here because it's a DA list, which is it inherits from DA object. Well, we definitely caught some typos. So we might just try running it and see with the newest changes that we've made and see if we've made any progress. I don't know if you'd saved it in VS Code.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you're probably going to want to change the interview template, like I said, so that it references
Text instead of email.
and it has that code embedded in it using the interview URL that was attached to the. You can use the exact same, just but shorter text that's from the email template, I think.
Right. Do you want to check the log and see if it's sent now? Because it takes a.
Yeah, it takes like a second or two. I mean, sometimes it's almost instant for me, usually with text messages.
Mhm.
So we are getting this undefined error.
User signature date is undefined.
Oh, 1427. Okay, yeah, that's now.
We didn't, did you ask for a date, Mariah? I don't think we asked for a date in the interview, did we?
No.
So that's why it's I mean,
All right, so let's look.
yeah, we don't ask for a date of signing.
But yeah,
Oh, it says equals today.
Oh, there we go. So we decided not to just, yeah.
you're not attaching it anywhere though, are you? I mean, so that shouldn't really matter. It's not part of the SMS code.
Right.
We were triggered that. It does show you that message when you're using a docx file for each thing that it triggers, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's an error.
Oh, I see, right. Does it make sense to look at the other log also, Quentin, or no?
Yeah, actually, seeing that it's all in a background action, I think it would be in there. It's in the worker.log.
Well, something succeeded. Oh, assemble succeeded, yeah.
Well, that actually looks pretty good. It returned a value there, but we didn't ever get the SMS, huh?
No. Empty phone.
Let's scroll up a little bit and read this error message a little bit more detail. Because actually, I think the task returned okay, but that doesn't mean that the actual interview returned okay. So it's saying it couldn't find a variable called witnesses.email template. So maybe that was a mistake. It happened in our background task. Even though you weren't trying to use it, the timing of that looks like it just was called. So let's just see. That might have been a typo.
So you think it should go back to witness?
Did it say witness.email template?
Let's
before?
look at the, oh, I see what you're saying. The email template is an attribute of
Of the DA list
witnesses,
named
of
witnesses.
the list, witnesses.
Yeah. I mean, definitely it can't be witness singular because we don't have witness singular defined when this block is called. But it could be witnesses bracket I. Let's just see if we can find where email template is defined one more time. We should be able to figure it out from that.
That's initial email template.
Right. Oh, well, the mail template is to witnesses and initial is to the user. That was.
So it's
one-
supposed to be bracket I. That
Okay.
makes more sense anyway. I'm not sure if there's any lessons from this about naming and commenting or not, but you can see this is how I try to read someone else's code, what we've been doing.
Should we
Not
try
sure
to run that?
how to name things to make it easier for people to read your code or not. But one thing is really nice about this is I think the order of the code blocks is pretty clear. Like anytime we look for something, it was like, oh, it's the next block right after the thing we're reading. So we didn't really need to use the search function as much as we did.
Do you want me to run this with the I?
Yeah, that seems to be the only error. And then we can go back and look at it. So I think what happened before, we didn't really know what we were looking for in the worker.log. But that seems to be the only error in this.
Okay.
And there's a long trace back, which gives more detail of how to find the error, but really it's just the one error. So, I mean, one thing I'm thinking about that might make it easier to trace is it doesn't necessarily have to be in a background action. But when you do use a background task, you have to really make sure everything works because you don't get any errors on the screen. It doesn't interrupt the user's flow. It just will fail in the background.
Mhm.
Okay. There were no errors in the background task. Oh, this isn't in the background task. We're looking in the regular. So we want to change
Yes.
the log still.
You want to go back there?
The worker.
And did you put in the text, the cell phone number, and it didn't get sent?
Yeah, not
Okay.
yet.
All right. Yeah, like I said, it's usually instant. Okay, so send email seems to have worked, but it failed with error of type bad request error. All right, so why is it even sending out an email? So I think we have a problem with our if statement then, is what that's telling me. Because it shouldn't have called send email, should it?
Right.
Mm-mm.
Or at least not.
Yeah, we didn't
Twice.
say for it to email. We said for it, yeah.
You maybe, does one email go out to the person who's the user of the form and one goes out to the other signers?
Well, I didn't get one if it did,
Uh-huh.
because I have my.
Well, it's saying it failed with type bad requests error. Let's look at the logic one more time and just make sure that seems right. So what is, so if it email or text equals text, uppercase T, that exact word. So is it possible that that's not what you have in the,
Yep.
let's check. in your choices statement. You might be checking for the wrong thing. Ah, it looks like it's text lowercase
Do
t.
you want to email? Oh, look at that. Yep.
The joys of coding.
Yeah.
So it was never trying to send the SMS. There might be an error to check there with the lines 44 and 45, but we don't have to worry about that. You might not have put a real email address in. I don't know. Let's just try running it now, because now we should be hitting the text condition.
Okay.
Oh, probably the email is undefined, right? There's an email, but it's
Mhm.
because it wasn't the user's email, it was the witness's email,
Witness email.
which you never provided. All right, moment of truth. That feels like it was the last error, but let's see.
Ah! Guess what? I just got pinged. Hi, Mariah Jennings Ramsey sent you a form from Mass Access to sign the form. Click the link.
Oh my gosh, that was all for one T.
That's amazing.
Oh boy.
Okay, so interestingly enough, though, there isn't a link.
Oh, okay.
There's a
Does it say
code, but not the link.
Does it just say interview _ URL? No, it's in there as a code. Okay. Are you sure? If you click on it, it doesn't do anything?
It's just, I don't know if you can see it, but it's just this long, it's not a link. It's just lowercase y3tgndpwue, blah, blah. It's not a link.
Weird. Okay. Well, I would play around with this. Now, you just have to change this template to look like the email template.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be a reason to do, to make it an attribute of the witness
Put
itself.
it in the template, interview URL,
So
right?
each user gets their own template, email template.
Oh, it says interview link. It says a template is interview link. So it should, hi username.text, right? Sent you a form from Mass Access to sign. It says interview URL there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does.
So that, I should have gotten it. That's in the template.
Yeah, you should have. But I think that probably rather than play around with debugging that, I would say copy the code from the other email template.
That might have just come out as text. You might want to put something in square brackets before then, and then put parens around the, because it might not have been it might not have interpreted as a markdown. So on line 51, to the left of the $, do open square bracket, and then some text, whatever you want to call the link. So just write link or something, and then
I'm not sure that
close
links
bracket.
are the SMS definition, so I'm not sure if you can really use markdown other than markdown that will add new
No
lines.
space, then open paren. Okay, I don't know if you can, but that's one thing to try. Open paren, and then I would do a space, and then at the end space, and then close paren. So
I see what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, you could definitely try that.
I think this is markdown, isn't it?
It's
I just think it's interpreting it as a
But Michelle, if that were true, I should still get the unlinked link. I should still get the interview URL.
Is it just giving it the end of the URL? Do you need some kind of argument or something?
Not sure if there's an easy way for you to show us what it did send you, Caroline.
Sure, I think I can do that. Let me just, I think I can do it. Wait a second.
Maybe if you copy and paste it into something, I guess that might work.
Yeah, or I can just do this, grab. And then I can, let's see, I know I can do this. Wait a second.
You can put it in Slack if you.
I know, just have to figure out how to do it. Wait a second. Okay, wait a second. Just so that. Just takes me a minute to find my way around my phone.
While you're looking for that, Caroline, I think what we probably want to do is, you see on line 45 there, it's referencing a template that's unique for each witness who gets sent the link, right?
Mhm.
We probably want to replicate that. If there's no reason to not use the like special code that he set up to give each person a unique name, unique password, basically, that is, to get into the interview.
Okay.
So we might want to do the same thing. Do you want to scroll down a little bit and see what that template looks like? The template for the interview email. Of course, like one difference is that it can use HTML. I am pretty sure you cannot do that with an SMS message. You can't send HTML. Probably be like witnessesI.email template.
Isn't it right here? Initial email template?
No.
Oh, wait a no, this isn't it.
Oh,
This
it's
is
The
the
one that goes to the user. There we go. So we'd want to do something like this and see how it's not just sending out it's sending out the sign URL. That's probably what we want to send. witnessesI.sign URL.
I did get a URL. It was one of, my thing broke it up into 3 messages. But what I got a URL to is to the interview, not to the, you know what I mean? Not the form.
Oh, okay. All right, so the link worked. It was just a problem with it. The length of it made it hard to interact with.
Yeah, and also it's not sending me to sign. It's sending me to start the interview myself.
Right. So we want to use this sign URL that's on line 192. We want something that looks like that.
And I posted it to Slack, and now I don't.
Just,
There it is. There it is. Okay. So
we want the code like this to take.
Yeah, that looks good. And instead of email template, we want to turn it into
SMS template.
SMS template. Yep, looks good. You don't have to absolutely get rid of the subject. It just gets kind of smushed into an SMS. Just I think there actually is a concept in SMS of having a subject and a body.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the Twilio API that Jonathan's using takes advantage of that. It just smushes it all together.
Mm-hmm.
So you could, where it says subject, take that out and put it into content, or you can keep it where it is. It will still work either way.
Do you need to have a subject at all? Do you have a subject line?
Subject is optional, but what it does is it just all comes in as one text.
Yeah.
And then the
So-
clip here.
Okay, so I'll take out subject and I'll move the content up. That's what we're
Mhm.
saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
It makes it clear what's happening, I think, because
Okay.
it doesn't really do anything.
So what
Okay.
I just put it after that, the information, right? Your signature,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes
your
sense.
name, your signature is needed on a document for a user. Click here.
And you might want to put like a dot there. Sorry, made it look like you already have one.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay.
And then you could just use 2 spaces at the end of the line to get a new line, the line break. Okay. All right, and now change the template here. Instead of saying interview_link, make it witnessesI.sms template. Well, you make sure you put back in the template equal.
Wait, what?
Type
What?
template equals right where you are.
Yep. This is another example of a keyword argument. So you have to say the name of the argument that you're specifying there.
Okay.
It's optional.
And then all of this can just be removed, right?
Yeah, you're not using that template anymore.
Are you using that for, wait, do you have we have an email template, right?
Yep, the email template's
Oh,
a
okay.
different piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't need that anymore. That's right. So that should do it. Now will be the link that takes you into the signature for that particular user.
I wonder, can she go, if she syncs, can she go back a couple steps on the interview itself and refresh it and see if that works rather than having to do the whole interview again?
Yeah, that should work. So after you go back, refresh it. Yeah, I think.
Let's see. Hi, so to sign the form, click the link. Let's see. Oops. I'll have to. Okay, 1, 2 below. So to sign the form, click the link, which comes first. Ugh, sending me the interview guy again. Unable to locate interview session, starting a new session instead. Oh, that's the message.
Interesting. Okay. So that might have to do with saving and then refreshing.
Oh yeah, so we should just try it without, just try it
Yeah.
from the beginning again.
Yeah, because I think it's what happened there is that it's built that interview link.
Mm-hmm.
that
Oh, I see, yeah.
user,
Right,
and
so
that's
it's sending the old one, yeah.
it's sending the link to the old session.
Yeah. And so when you refresh it, you're creating a new session, is that what's happening?
When you're yes, that's right. When you're using the playground as the place that you're starting from. So that's, yeah, something to keep in mind for testing is that you run into a lot of different kinds of weird behaviors when you're saving and running from the playground. You will
Yeah.
never see in production, which can be frustrating. You're like,
Yeah.
I have this really bad user experience, but it actually isn't something that will ever be seen by a real user.
Oops. Oh yeah, you put it in.
I just
Okay,
kinda-
and another text message. Your signature needed on a document from Mariah Jennings Ramsey.
Oh, that's so weird how I'm seeing the text that you put in your on the Slack, Caroline, that it's broken it into 3 screens in the wrong
Yeah.
order.
That makes it a little hard to, and also if you notice, it's not in the right order either.
Yes.
2 out of 3, 1 out of, okay, so now I think the one I just received is only, Dear Caroline, your signature needed on a document from Mariah Jennings Ramsey, no link at all. At least it's sending now. Oops, a voicemail. No, it's, never mind. That's a voicemail.
Is it coming in a couple texts again?
And I did get an email saying that it was sent to Carolyn,
Okay, well, that's good.
which is good.
My guess is that's
It's the formatting of the link.
yeah. If I mean that's something we should be aware of, I guess. So one answer
Okay,
is
so, Finola and Sinead actually did some texting with a link.
Mhm.
So maybe we can look at their, and they tested on me because they've got UK numbers. So
Okay.
they couldn't send to them, so they sent to me, and that did work.
Okay,
So maybe we could look at their SMS template.
sure. That makes sense. Yeah, I'm just a little worried it's too long. So part of it is that it's a really long name for the playground, and then multiple signatures, text and email. And then
Well,
the
it
name
did.
of the
It went.
file.
So what it did is it broke. If you noticed in the screen grab I sent you,
Mhm.
the URL was quite long, but it was all in one piece, right? So
Yeah, just so other people can see.
yeah.
It's
Oh yeah. So it says, oh, there it is. It breaks it up, doesn't it? It says session equals. Oh. So maybe it did send me the link, but I didn't. It didn't include the session number in the.
So maybe that the markdown I was talking about before might help with that, because it wouldn't need to send it, or will the markdown not work for the email?
I'm pretty sure you can't use any kind of special formatting in a text message. There might be a way around it that just isn't implemented in DocAssemble. Like I mean, you can do some funky things with SMS, with
Well,
MS rather. That is. It's not
How
right.
about HTML?
You cannot send HTML in a text message, at least not the way that it's implemented in DocAssemble.
I'm gonna see
Like
if I
line
can.
breaks and such. That's pretty much it.
How do you make a link on a phone?
The phone turns it into a link. So when it's broken up into multiple texts like that, then you have problems. You see that they each had a number 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Most phones will regroup them and put them in the right order, but not all phones. So I don't know if that's carrier dependent, if it depends on like the kind of phone you're using. What do you have, Caroline?
I have US Cellular, so
And it's iPhone.
iPhone SE. I have an old
That's
one.
a great, thank you for being a tester, because that's a great case to have show up. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I'm not sure how to solve around that. So like that's why Twitter has their old character limit was based around what was a safe number of characters to put in a text message. And we might have to try to change the chunking
Yeah.
so that doesn't fall in the middle of a URL ever.
Yeah.
And I have never had that problem, but like again, it has to do with your phone
Right.
and carrier both. So
But even, I mean, there's got to be a way, because
I mean, one
Well,
could be
maybe we
the
could do
URL
something
shortener.
like use Bitly or something.
yeah,
for
that's what I
short-
was thinking. Does DA have a shortener?
Well, I mean, we can create our own, but it wouldn't be. I mean, we have a long URL. apps.suffolklitlab.org is pretty long.
Yeah.
I think a lot of URL shorteners don't have public APIs anymore. But
Will that be that's the dev server though? Will it be shorter in production?
oh well, the dev's a little bit longer. You're right. It has 4 extra characters. It's not really shorter
Oh, okay.
in production. There are some parts of it that are longer than they will be in real.
The name of our file, though, we called it multiple signatures, text, and email. I mean, that you could just be made into like MST, right? And
Well,
that would
Right.
yeah.
be a
So
lot.
I mean, yeah. I mean, because the thing is, so the URL is quite long. So you have the server, then you have the docassemble.playground, then you have the long playground. Then you have the package name, and then you have the session, and the session number is
quite long.
it's like 30 characters.
Yep.
Is
So
there
I
any way
think
to
you
make
really-
that shortener? I mean, there's a thing that provides a shorter link to an interview, first, like a fresh interview, but I think you have to program that domain name in, or is that generatable? Like you have, 209A start or something like that.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a built-in feature. So I mean, we obviously could create our own URL shortener, but it wouldn't be the one that DocAssemble has.
What if, Quentin, this is totally brainstorming. So DocAssemble creates a URL for each witness, essentially, right? It sends it, the URL, because it has the code in it, right? is there a way that we could do something in the interview that just brings people to a page in the oh no, because it's still the session. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not gonna work. You still need the session number in it, right?
Yeah, I think we'll have to do more experiments with this. So,
Okay.
I mean, it only was just barely cut off. So,
Well, the whole code got cut off. You had session equals, and then you
Right.
got 35 characters cut off.
yeah. Oh, was it like, yeah, you're right. Okay, so 30 characters. That is pretty far. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we probably need to look into whether there's a free URL shortener we can use. Or if we don't trust those, or if we think those are going to be blocked as spam text, like if there's another option we can use to get
Mhm.
shortened URLs.
I don't think, how do shorten, well, I worry about it going through a third party, like going a like private.
Yeah, that's what I'm
private
saying. Like
going
Yeah.
through.
we don't necessarily want to trust that. And yeah,
Jonathan might already have a solution for this. I mean, he did all the work for the SMS. He might already have something that it's worth asking or doing the research, I think.
yeah,
So the
there might
question
also be
is- yeah,
Twilio
so
options
may
that
I
will help.
About what I might have it. I'm just thinking I already did get, I got a text from Finola and Sinead's, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what
It
did
might just be
that had to have
coincidence.
a similar thing, right?
It might have been a coincidence that worked.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, just like I'm noticing that the project path, for example, is really long, and the interview name is really long. So if either of those were shorter,
Yeah.
it might have been enough to let it work.
Oh, that's
But
so
we
wrong.
don't, yeah.
It's a good idea to ask Jonathan. He might have an idea for how to handle it. It's also worth looking at the Twilio API and see if they have any suggestions for not having links cut off. Actually, Twilio might have its own URL shortener.
Okay, so guess this is, can you see my phone or should I do another screen grab? It's sorry, it's reflecting. Wait a minute.
Yeah, I can't see it.
No, I think screen grab would be better.
So I'll do another screen grab and send it because this is interesting because the one that they sent me has just like a little icon, Mass Access Apps Dev Suffolk Lit Lab. It doesn't even have the URL. It just has well, it's an error now, but that's kind of, it's not, you don't even see the URL on it. Do you see what I mean? You just get this little, I mean, there must be a URL, but the URL does the image. It's just an image in the message.
Well, that could be only to do with your phone.
Right,
So
interpreting the
yeah.
URL. So the URL had to be short enough that the phone could follow it.
it has to be able to find it, and then
Right,
it has to be able to.
right.
maybe
And I
click-
can't, on my phone, I can't see, I guess I can't see what the URL is. It just hides it.
All right, I think Maeve and I have to jump on a call.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, at least this makes me feel a lot better about not getting it to work.
But you figured out what the problem is. That seems, I mean, that's a big step.
Yeah, we figured out our own coder developer issues. And then we also figured out something else that we can't solve. So maybe
See you
for
guys.
this, I mean, we were talking
Bye.
about getting this out this
Bye.
week. So
Bye.
maybe